I don't care what anybody says. That is a kick butt intro.
Hey, who did the song for you guys, or did one of you guys do it?
We bought it from one of those royalty free, music.
No, not the design. You made the little flag.
Oh, the little. Oh yeah.
No, I'm talking about the song, but the
song was I bought that on one of those royalty free things, and I just like the sound of it, and it kind of queued up really well with the montage we'd created, and that was just kind of providential because normally I don't know how to do stuff like that, but. Chris, you're actually here at a momentous occasion. This only happens once every holy year, where Jason and Mark appear together on the podcast that they started together. Jason, welcome back to the show, my brother. Great to have you.
It feels kind of different being here. Hope I remember how to do this.
Everything is right where we left everything right where you left it. I'm having a Dos Equis tonight. I hope nobody minds.
I do not.
Yeah, and Jason, I'm going to let you introduce the show. I'm here for color commentary because I play Call of Duty, and that's about and I also play PGA 2K Sports on my PlayStation. Other than that, my gaming experience is very limited.
Lots of Gnosticism in sports.
So I'm sure there is, and I'm sure there's tons in Call of Duty. I'll be honest with you. I probably don't know a lot about Gnosticism either. So I'm looking forward to learning something tonight. Jason, introduce our guest.
Yeah, no, I met Chris online on Twitter, or X now. I forgot what brought it up, but we were introduced, and he had talked about he had made a comment about how there was a lot of, in the gaming industry and even in popular culture, there's a lot of Gnosticism in there, and it really opened his eyes to it after he read Against Heresies from St Irenaeus, and then he was talking about Super Mario.
Really? Okay, I'm interested. That's
comparing that to St. George and the Dragon, and we just had a bunch of offline discussions, and I was like, I'm kind of like you. I play video games, but since I've become an adult, it's a lot more limited with responsibilities and stuff like that. I do play the sports games, like your football, your baseball. I play the Call of Duty every now and then, though we haven't played that in a while. But I still do have a general interest in video games and stuff like that. But the things that Chris was talking about offline, it just really piqued my interest. I was like, you know what, that might make for a really good topic. Is going to tie in Catholicism with the popular culture and the gaming industry specifically. So I have not read Against Heresies. I did, after talking to Chris, I did go out and buy it.
That's because Jason is actually pro heresy. Not a lot of people don't know that. He's actually told me that offline.
You're text communicated.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. Continue.
But no, I mean, that was pretty much it. So I went out and bought Against Heresies after having discussions with him, because I've known about the book from the point of my conversion. I just never got around to reading it, because you always got these other books you're wanting to read, and you got all these other books up there that haven't been read yet.
Absolutely.
But I do want to read this, and I am interested to see how he ties all that in together.
This is another good one, by the way. It goes through like all the heresies of the early church. It's called History of the Church. I really like this translator, even though he's an Anglican heretic. But anyway,
the ironic.
G.A. Williamson. He did a translation of this, and then a translation of, I believe it was Josephus's The Jewish War, which I read as well.
We're also live streaming this on Chrillcast on Christopher.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
To everybody on Chrillcast, welcome to Text Cathedra and vice versa.
Chrillcast, like the little shrimp-looking thing in the sea.
Chrillcast.
Yeah, it's actually a smashed together version of mine and my co-hosts' names, Will and Chris. Krill.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, in Houston we like to keep it trill. Trill is a thing down here.
We call it trill. Sounds too shrill, and I don't like the way that sounds like, so we're gonna stick with Chrillcast. It sounds nice.
Fair enough. So
I did want to ask Chris real quick, because we've just briefly talked online. If you don't mind, are you just a little bit about your background? Are you a convert? Are you a cradle Catholic, or what was your background coming into this?
absolutely cradle Catholic. Okay, so
For us,
very lukewarm upbringing when it comes. Like I went through catechism, I did all the sacraments, but it wasn't till like after marriage, really, about around the time I got married, I started taking my faith more seriously, and then 4 years later, we had the whole COVID pandemic, fun stuff, and then my faith like just exploded after that. So it's been lots of reading, lots of learning about the faith, and as my kids get older, I got 5 kids. We've been learning with them as well as teaching them and all that other fun stuff. So
yeah,
really, that's my background. I've been a Catholic my whole life.
Awesome.
Never
Okay.
to any of the other denominations, if you want to call them that.
It's not any better out there. Don't let people fool you.
Yeah. So I've been a Catholic my whole life. I've never pretended or said I was something else. So
Okay.
as far as
did you find like, so when you were away from faith, because I've been away from faith for a while too, and I guess it's almost inconceivable that you would ever become anything else. Like I was actually just fine being an atheist.
let me tell you a story.
But I was not. It's weird how Catholicism digs its hooks into you.
It does. Oh, it absolutely does. So before I met my wife, around like senior year of high school, I got invited to go to a non-denominational and a Baptist church because I liked some girl that was going there or something. I don't remember. It was something like that. The first time I saw
the whole reason any of us went to Life Teen for the girls.
The first time I saw some dude with his hands in the air like this, I was like, I gotta leave. I'll see you later. I was like, I can't do this no matter what.
Yeah, that's Mark's favorite thing to do during Mass.
It is.
As a cradle Catholic, I really believe that.
To me, it all comes down to the sign of peace. When the sign of peace comes around, I'm like, Mark, this is your time to shine.
Now, do you know like roughly the history of the sign of peace?
No, and tell me. I mean, I may have heard it, but I mean, I'd be willing to. I have no idea. Let's be honest.
In the early church, a lot of people for those 6 days between going to Mass and then or the Lord, whatever they called it at the time. I'm pretty sure it was still called something similar to Mass, but basically those 6 days, they pretty much didn't see their neighbors as much because they were working and toiling away at whatever job the Roman Empire had for them at the time. And on day 7, when you have your Mass, right? I'm sorry, the start of the week, right? The Lord's Day. Anyway, they would go to Mass, and basically that was their time to make peace with their neighbors if they hadn't done so prior to Mass, so that they could go up in a state of grace to receive communion.
How interesting. When you had asked that question before, do you know the history of the sign of peace? The way I meant to answer it was, of course. but I just so I know that what do you think the origin of that is? That's the way I should have answered that.
There you go.
Yeah, I was close. Who is Grayson? I don't know. Oh, no. Jason.
You meant the first one. Anyway, I'm just kidding.
Tell me what Gnosticism is. Break it down. I hear that word used so like I hear atheists all the time tell me they're agnostics when they're really just atheists.
Actually, it's even funnier that they call themselves agnostic because you know what gnosis means? It means knowledge.
I would imagine.
So like you're essentially saying, when you say agnostic, you're basically saying I have no knowledge.
Oh, agnostic.
It's kind of a funny way.
No knowledge.
It's what they mean is I have no knowledge of God, but
or that God is fundamentally unknowable, right?
Yeah, something like that.
It's just happy irony.
It is really funny. I find the idea of being agnostic kind of silly, but it is what it is.
It's so ingrained in our culture. I mean, I kind of think Freemasonry has a lot to do with that. In our the American understanding of religion is that we need the diversity of religions because fundamentally, who can really know anything, right? It's woven into the fabric of Freemasonry, and who, of course, were instrumental in the founding of our country and its religious understanding. I mean, Freemasonry is written all through our founding documents and things like that. And there's sort of this deal of you have to be you don't just have to be respectful of other people's religious beliefs, but you have to hold their beliefs just as valid as yours, because at the end of the day, it's just impossible to really know anything about anything. And I don't know. Am I wrong? You think I'm crazy?
No, I think you're correct to a degree. I posted in the private chat, but I'll say this out loud. Freemasonry is basically just Gnosticism with more steps.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. That, yeah.
All right.
Exactly. It's Freemasonry. It's ritualistic Gnosticism. I guess you could say it.
So Gnosticism, really, when it comes down to it, is basically a secret group with levels of knowledge, and like the further you advance in a Gnostic religion, the further your level of expertise in it becomes.
Oh,
it's kind of like a secret club cult.
It's a cult.
And Christian Gnosticism is the worst version of it, but we'll get to that. The idea of Gnosticism really is kind of like a mixture of Christianity and Zoroastrianism and all that fun stuff, like your old school Eastern religions, mixed with a little bit of paganism. Really, the funny thing is that this document right here, the Against Heresies, is actually like against the knowledge falsely so called. So it's basically like being sarcastic when they call it Gnosticism.
Gotcha.
Like you're not actually intelligent. We're just sarcastically calling it intelligence because we all know it's not.
Okay. Okay.
The funny story is that they take the holy scriptures, like for the Christian Gnosticism, and they basically just turn it on its head by using numbers and codes and basically invent an early church Da Vinci Code.
Right.
I mean, it's really what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's funny how sarcastically quickly he dismantles it right in the beginning, because he's like, how crazy is this? They're saying there's 32 gods involved in this Ogdoad of blah, 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 blah. At some point, he brings up the fact that the Gnostics believe that this female deity, I don't remember what her name is, but this female deity allegedly creates like the oceans with her tears. She creates the salt, like the inland lakes with her sweat. And he goes, so where does the hot water come from?
I was just, as you were saying this,
what?
I was as you're saying this, I'm like, oh my goodness, the Cardinals are going to love this new religion. Don't just let's stop talking about it now, because this will be the basis of the next papal encyclical. Guys,
we're heading
guys,
to the Pachamama of Gnosticism.
Oh my goodness. You don't even want to get me started on that nonsense. Anyway, okay, so you and Jason have had Jason, tell me about this conversation you're having about how the Gnosticism relates to video games and pop culture, because
I haven't gotten there yet with him.
Okay,
like I said, he hadn't gotten there with me yet. We had a lot of actually really good brief discussions, and he has a lot of different parallels it seems that he can make and draw together. But like I told him offline, I know the basic tenets, I guess you want to say, of Gnosticism on a very basic level. Like, I know about all the different gods and the secret knowledge and stuff like that. But I told him I don't know enough about it in general, but I don't know enough about it to tie it into the gaming industry and popular culture. So I was just, like I told him, I'm going to be here having him on our show as a guest, learning from him as he's talking about his insights on it.
So what I can tell you is this. Every heresy the church has ever gone through exists in Gnosticism, almost all of them. So like the Arian heresy that goes on in here, they try to say that when Jesus died, his soul went to heaven, but his body remained on earth. They make claims like that. But the three things you need for a Gnostic cult are crazy guy in charge, right? Like a cult leader, lots and lots of promiscuous activity between the wives of followers and the cult leader, and then a load of heresy. Those are the three things you need to have a Gnostic cult. And that's basically all you need right there. And what they do is they go after the women first, just like modern cults. They go after the women first. They try to get them involved, because if they get to the women, then the men will follow.
Right. So
that's how the Gnostic cults form. And one of the biggest one is the Marcionites. They're mentioned in here. And then I think if Irenaeus had lived longer, because it's funny, he's only 2 steps out from the apostles. You've got St. John the Apostle, Polycarp, the follower of St. John, followed by Irenaeus. Like literally within those 200 years, you've got those 3. It's like he's only 2 degrees removed, whereas these heretics are like several generations out.
Yeah.
It's funny how that all works. But really, any Gnosticism in modern day is not nearly as complicated. It's when somebody takes a group of ideas together, and like you have progressing levels of knowledge, and then the way it becomes heresy is by rejecting or accepting some secret truth of Christianity or the outside of Christianity that puts you outside the church. That becomes a Gnostic Christian cult because you're essentially following some heresy instead of what is the dogma or the foundational pieces of the church. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. And I did real quick, I did want to make a comment. You had mentioned that one of the ways for these Gnostic cults to start is they have to get the women going and leading the men. And, you know, in a properly ordered society and family life and all that, the men are called to lead and supposed to lead. So it seems like, you know, it's the same problem we're facing today. There's an inversion of this hierarchy, which leads to these heresies and which leads to even worse things.
I mean, I think there's something there's something attractive about telling people, hey, let me let you in on a secret. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all these other people are wrong, but I've got the truth. And if you join me, we can be a part of the true, you know, church together and all these other idiots out there. There's something attractive about that. And I can see what could. So one of my biggest issues with what passes for modern Protestantism, and I say that because I personally do not believe that Luther or Calvin would have anything in the world to do with something like Lakewood Church, but is that the Bible, because we can't talk about who wrote the Bible and we can't talk about where the Bible really comes from because that leads back to Rome. So we can't go there. The Bible becomes this really mystical tome and it requires a lot of study and decipherment. And we've got to, you know, you'll see these books, the Bible code. And if you can hack the code, then, you know, that thing in the Bible about no man knowing the day or the hour. Let me teach Jesus how this is done here. We'll see what we do is we add and subtract these numbers. And I just think, do you really think you're going to outsmart God? Does that make sense? When you say it out loud, does it make sense to you? And if you're really so interested in the Bible and what its truths are and to delve into its mysteries and things like that, why can't we go back to the foundational, to the fathers who put the thing together, to the apostles who we know wrote these firsthand accounts? Why on earth is there? Who is the guy who had predicted a few years ago that the world was coming to an end in 2012 because Harold Camp. Oh,
Harold Camp. Okay.
Yeah. Classic Gnostic fallacy.
That would be definitely a Gnostic fallacy. I would agree with that.
But it just goes. I mean, it perpetuates. This doesn't ever really seem to go away, you know. And
no, it doesn't. Gnosticism has been with the church from day one, and I think it will continue to follow into the future. It's just how things roll out. People want to be. Let me ask you this. Let's see if this sounds familiar to you or not. All right. Let's say you're in a prayer group. You're in I don't know, a small room. There's a bunch of people. You know, they're all kind of really feeling the spirit. And the leader of the group says, prophesy. And then all of a sudden, some woman starts speaking in some language you've never heard of.
Right.
Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
I know what that is. I mean,
does that sound like a modern movement of the church?
Yeah, the charismatic movement.
That's actually word for word what happens in several of the cults in this book. Literally.
Well, I can proudly say I've always rejected the charismatic movement, even as a Protestant. But I do have a question for you. I don't mean to get too far off topic on the whole how it ties into the gaming industry and stuff like that. But you know, from my understanding, I want to make sure that I'm right. But I've always, when there's anti-Catholic dialogue, and they talk about, and I think it's in Timothy where he says, you know, people will come along and they'll forbid eating of meats, forbid marriage, this and that, and they'll say, "Ha ha." See, they're predicting the Catholics. But I've always understood that no, because obviously the Catholic Church does not forbid marriage. It's a sacrament. It doesn't forbid eating meats. It talks about, you know, you should do penance at certain times of the year by refraining maybe from meats or whatever. But my understanding is that it's more or less referring to Gnosticism. St. Paul is referring to the oncoming oncoming heresy of Gnosticism. Yeah,
he's talking about. Well, actually, he's tying into something that's happening during that time, but especially when he's talking about the women in that chapter, he's talking about women in general, but he's specifically talking about the women who are forming some cult. I think it's like the cult of Aphrodite, but they're pretending it to be Mary or something. I don't remember the exact details, but it's something related to like women shaving their heads and doing
Syncretism
some
of
really
some type.
crazy. Yeah, it's like some crazy female-led religion that was going on at the time, and that's what he's specifically saying. That's not okay, but he's also saying that like religions shouldn't be forbidding things necessarily, but like you can still sacrifice, like you can still, like you're saying. So like fasting on Fridays, I do that all year round. Well, at least I do the no meat thing, and actually I have a weird version of fasting that I do, but we can get into that later if you're curious. I learned about it because I was reading Butler's Lives of the Saints, and it specifically talks about this version of fasting that I can do much easier than regular fasting. Not eating all day is very difficult. I do it on Ash Wednesday, I do it on Good Friday, but I pretty much don't do like a full day of fast except on those days. But anyways, yeah, he's basically saying like it's not forbidden to eat meat. It's not forbidden to do these things, but you can still, like you said, fast to sacrificing that kind of. They were already doing that in the early church. Have you ever read? I think it's the Didache. That's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Have you guys been through that yet?
I have.
Parts of it, yeah.
I believe fasting is in there on Wednesdays and Fridays. Could be wrong.
Oh, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head. I mean, I do think what's,
yeah, but no, I was
Go
just
ahead,
gonna say, yeah, and so yeah, my understanding of that is that St. Paul is already preaching against this Gnosticism that's already infiltrating the church, or trying to, at least.
There's a person in the chat who says that they're Paul. Do you see that?
I do. I don't get it.
Probably
TV
because
show, and I don't know what TV show.
Interesting.
I don't know. I don't get it.
That's
okay. Don't feel bad, Caitlin. You're not talking to the brightest bulb in the world right now. Interesting thing. One of the most interesting things about the Didache for me, and this is totally off topic, but welcome to our show.
Hey, topic is how I roll.
Is that the prayer that precedes the preface to the canon of the Mass. Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu tuo sursum corda habemus ad Dominum, Dominus agamo Domino Deum nostrum, dignum et justum est. That prayer has been a part of the church since the 1st century, and the Didache proves it. So it is still that prayer is recited in every Catholic and Orthodox liturgy that I'm aware of, and that was pretty cool. That's a very old liturgical prayer. That introduction to the preface. Anyway,
have you guys seen that meme where the Protestant says, I only recite prayers that are pre-Constantine, and so somebody whips out the Greek Theotokos prayer, and they're like, "This is pre-Constantine," and it's like way more regal than the Hail Mary.
I haven't seen that one.
It's amazing. I love it. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But
okay, video games. Now, when you talk about video, are you talking about the storylines and the plot lines in, I'm guessing, like role-playing type games or something like that, or is it
JRPGs especially? Yes, JRPGs especially.
Okay.
There's also just in general, like how many, almost the.
What are JRPGs? Sorry, what are
Japanese
JRPGs?
role-playing games?
Oh, Jason, you're so. Okay.
And one of the reasons why JRPGs are especially affected is because in Japanese culture they have like the light and the dark like mix, and you get like the yin yang thing, and so a lot of and they're fascinated by religion, but they don't generally subscribe to specific religions, unless you want to talk about what happened during the bombing of either Hiroshima or Nagasaki, where a bunch of Catholics were in church when it happened. But that's neither here nor there. The whole idea of their ideas of religion is that all religions are fascinating, so they'll just incorporate them into their video games. It's like Final Fantasy has some pieces of it, or like a very popular game right now, the Persona series, literally has Gnosticism in it. It's literally Gnosticism straight out of the book of whatever they wrote back when. Or like they have another one called Shin Megami Tensei. That's another JRPG. And that one is literally, the Shin Megami Tensei means goddess rebirth. So it already has Gnostic heresy written all over it. But they're just fascinated by all stuff. So they cram into their storylines religion just in general. So
Okay.
you'll find a lot of it in Japanese role-playing games.
I've also seen it, like I saw it in Diablo. I don't know if you played Diablo 2, the new Diablo game recently
absolutely.
or whatever. So there's a cult aspect in there, and there's of course levels and things like that.
I'm interested in The Witcher
ahead.
as well. The Witcher as well. They
Okay, I
actually
haven't played
have
that one.
I've only played the first two, and that was years ago now at this point.
Mhm.
But in the first one, they have an almost anti Our Father prayer in it. It's Our Mother something something something, but it's like the same prayer as the Our Father with Mother inserted, because they have a goddess, I guess, in whatever town the game's taking place in.
Tell me about Super Mario Brothers.
You want to get right into that?
I do, because I know we've all played that. That's what I know we've all played.
I was gonna say we should probably save that for later. Stay on the
No, I want to know it now. Okay.
The reason I say that is because I know that lost my train of thought. I know you also sent me an article about how the Japanese games will take out Christian symbols in video games and make it more palatable to the American audience. And sorry,
that was the Americans' fault. But let me just finish the Gnosticism thing. So there's actual physical storylines in games related to, they have like backstories to all these different like angels and demons, literally. And they have like the cult of Bethel and all kinds of stuff straight from the Bible that are like more Gnostic-y sounding by the time you get into them in the storylines. And so like, if you're not, as a parent, because I find this very disturbing, because it's more of a recent thing I've realized, your kids are going to be playing these games potentially because JRPGs are like Pokemon. Pokemon's kind of a gateway drug to all this stuff. And they lead you to all of these Gnostic ideas in the games. Like, and it rolls into, you've heard of Carl Jung before, like the psychology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heavy part of a lot of this. Carl Jung is something that the Japanese role-playing games have heavily embraced, where you have like the light and the dark and the personality types. And they'll throw in like, for like a mini game with tarot cards in it. And it's like, oh my goodness. And it's all connected. And it, in my opinion, what it can do is, if you don't know better, it can lead you down a path of like when you see too much violence on TV, you're like slowly getting immune to it. It can do a similar thing, because you'll just be like, oh, it's just a game. It's just a game, and then you'll start digging into the background stories of these games, and it's just a game, and then you keep going further. And now you find out your child is now reading up on demons, and that kind of stuff. And if you're not able to identify and at least have a conversation with your kids about this stuff, it can lead to some pretty wild thought processes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there have been games that I've seen out there that, I mean, we don't have them or play them. They haven't asked to play them or anything. But I have noticed games when I've been going through the lineup, on the online stores and stuff like that do have me concerned on that line of thinking. Like, well, I don't know if this is good or bad, but if I'm not comfortable with it, then I should probably just stay away from it, because, like you said, obviously as fathers, that's one of our top priorities, is to make sure that we don't let them willingly take in all this bad information that will skew their faith or skew their thought process.
Especially when there's better stuff out there. Like you can find, even if you like JRPGs, there's plenty of games you can find that don't have all that stuff in it. They exist. And I think it's better to try and find those kinds of things, filter.
What are ones that you like?
I used to like those when I was younger. That's what I'm saying. I used to like those games when I was younger.
Oh, I just didn't know if you had
even
any
more recently.
Like any specific ones that you're like, oh, that would be a good one.
Oh, I mean, I would say like things like Pokemon are probably safe. At least I haven't played a new one in a while. Maybe they're not, but I would imagine they probably are at this point. And then, like, for example, some of the Final Fantasy games, some of the older ones, they're just pixel art. You're not going to find yourself, you know what I mean? Like, how are you going to go? Totally not Gnostic. Love it. Like, how are you going to
Thank you, Darren.
Oh boy. Anyways, you just got to kind of sift through it. Like they exist. There are games out there that exist that are appropriate for children. And if you're willing to go and look at what the ratings are, they tell you, just like movies, let's say like it's rated this for violence, profanity, You can
Right.
find that stuff on the ratings of games. I can grab one later and show you on the back. They have ESRB ratings, which I don't always trust because cartoon violence can mean a lot of things.
Yeah. And yeah, I know what you're talking about the ratings, and I'm right there with you. I'm always, even with movie ratings, especially today, because you'll see movies today that'll say PG or PG-13, and they are using words that weren't allowed on PG movies when we were kids, you know.
We're allowed a certain
So-
number of those words in PG.
Or allotted, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it is hard to navigate out there, and you know, I also, on the flip side, I also don't like this idea of people that seem to always try to preach that video games in mass are bad. Like you should stay from video games. You know, it's, you know, you'll see the online people, they'll say they're gay, men shouldn't do that. It's horrible for your family. It's this or it's that. And I'm like, okay, well, you can't go to that. Yeah, you can't go to that extreme, right? Like I play video games every now and then. Am I obsessed with it? No. Does it rule my life? No. I enjoy it every now and then playing with my sons. Like we'll play Madden or we'll play NCAA football or baseball or, you know, whatever. But I think there has to be a distinction drawn in there that good can come from these games as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. The ones that I've let my kids play so far, the only thing I can say is I've read a bunch of psychology books, and sometimes if kids get an obsessive tendency towards games, that can also be dangerous.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, they can take things too far too.
Yeah, and like we were talking offline, you know, I do let my sons play, but it is at a very limited regard. You know, I don't let them just come home, sit down and play. I mean, to be honest, they don't even have time for it most of the time. Even if I would let them, they wouldn't have time for it to play that much. But yeah, I definitely also acknowledge and agree with the mental aspects, because it can also affect their attitude as well. You know, if you see kids out there that play games quite a bit, they seem to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe a little bit more irritable, especially while they're playing the game.
Withdrawn.
So I do look out for those in my sons. And if I ever feel like, hey, there's a little bit of an attitude shift or whatever, I'll take the thing away for a month, 2 months, or however long, you know, until they can learn to cope with it. Luckily, I haven't really had to deal with that, but
it's a dopamine, right? Like that's what the video games are designed to do. In order to keep you playing, it has to have some type of reward mechanism built into the game that activates something in your brain. Okay, so it starts out as something small. Every time Mario, to use an example, you know, finishes the level, and you feel good about that. And then, but the thing is like when young people
I was
cannot
usually
regulate.
More mad than good.
Yeah.
Well, I kept failing.
There you go.
The worst thing you can get is a live service game for a child.
But isn't that interesting how mad you'd get? And it's because it's like an addict who didn't get his fix, right? So the thing about kids is they can't regulate their dopamine intake. All they know is if a little of something feels good, a lot must be better. That's just the way young people are. I mean, that if they could raise themselves, we wouldn't have to be parents. And so I think in any sort of entertainment medium, I don't care if it's movies, I don't care if it's music or whatever it is, you have to teach young people how to regulate that dopamine intake.
Yep.
Yeah, man. And some of us adults could take a lesson. You're absolutely right. One of the things, you know, I was struggling recently last year with Sunday mass attendance, and I wasn't keeping up with it. And I had all kinds of excuses. And it all had to do with Pope Francis or this cardinal or this scandal or this, that, and the other thing. And then finally one day Jesus spoke to me and he was like, no, it's because you have the attention span of a gnat now, because you have developed an addiction to this thing. And now you can't sit through anything that takes time. And some things take time. They're meant to be savored. And as soon as I could feel him say that to me, and I was like, yeah, that's 100% correct. That's what's going on. So it's not something just for kids. I mean, as adults too, we have to learn to regulate our dopamine intake.
I've had that same thought process. The more that I mess with my phone, the harder it is for me to stay focused on reading. Like
yeah,
if
you
I'm
got to
reading
put the
a
phone
book.
away and turn it off.
Yeah,
Sure.
See,
Yeah.
last year
And
I read
sorry, go
50. I read 58 books last year, around 20,000 pages worth of reading last year,
Yeah.
and it was only because I was able to put my phone away and read for several hours a night.
well,
When
yeah,
the kids
and
go to bed, that's my reading time.
and that is something I need to do better, because what I need to do is just go ahead and buy a dictionary. Because if I'm reading a book and there's like say a word that I don't
yeah.
know, or that I'll look it up on my phone, and then it's like, well, let me check my email. Well, let me, and it's just
Jack,
just a
welcome to the
losing
show.
battle.
Shout out to Athens, Texas. What you stumbled upon is the best Catholic podcast known to man. So we know Pope Francis listens to it. We know that for a fact because we get stats on where our listenership comes from.
It says Italy.
There was one listener from Italy. Come on, man. We all know it was the Holy Father. We know that. So yeah, welcome aboard, man. Sorry, I had to interrupt there because every time we get a new listener,
are you guys getting the chats from my side too?
Possibly. I don't know.
You got Red Rover in there, I think, or no?
Yeah,
he's got
Red Rover's been on our show.
Okay, I wasn't sure
because
they're showing up in my chat.
He is in your chat because I see the little icon here.
So there's some good information in there talking about gaming, addiction disorder, behavioral addictions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a real thing. And actually that is something that, in my opinion, creates so video games as a whole becomes almost cult worship.
Yeah.
When you go in, because like there are people that will wake up every day. They will watch the Spawn Wave YouTube channel, which is actually a really good channel if you want gaming news. If you're really interested in that, that's a good channel. But they'll check that for brand new gaming news. Then they'll listen to like 6 different gaming channels about the same darn thing. And I fall into this trap years ago. You just end up listening to gaming content all day long. So what do you end up doing when you go home? Game. Mm-hmm. What do you do? But when you should be sleeping, gaming. It's very easy to fall into this cycle of just continuously looking for more information and creating almost your own little Gnostic cult in your head.
But I mean, it's a hobby for some people. I mean, some people are more enthusiastic about some than others, and
I'm saying there's a trap there.
But it's difficult to know. It's difficult to know. Like, okay, so I'm never going to listen to a gaming podcast, but that doesn't mean I'm more. That's not because I'm more virtuous than anybody else. It's just because it's not my.
Just kidding.
Except the Chrillcast, that's of course, but it's only because that isn't where my interests lie. But I mean, I'll join every stamp collecting group on planet Earth. Stamp collecting. I'm not your friend anymore. I don't even care what you say. Stamp collecting is super cool.
I'm not. I don't even like you anymore.
Of the world unite.
Don't get into my habit and start collecting breviaries because it gets very expensive very quickly.
Yeah, that is an expensive habit. That's for
no,
sure.
no, but I think to Chris's point, yeah, I mean, inherently there's nothing wrong. There isn't anything wrong with making that a hobby or anything like that, but it's the obsession where it takes over your life. But that's not just with video gaming either, right? It can be with pretty much anything. Like even just say like jujitsu. People do it and they do it every day, some twice a day. They watch videos about it when they're not at jiu-jitsu. They're talking about, these things can overtake your life to where God is now second place because this is your priority.
Yeah. I agree with that. That's exactly what I'm getting at.
And especially if you're getting your ideas about religion. See, the thing that's dangerous about Gnosticism to me. Okay, so if you came to me with a specific Gnostic theology, let's take Scientology, for example. It's Scientology, perfect example of I would reject that on its face. Okay. But there's an attitude about religion that is behind that I think definitely pervades not only gaming, but our entire Western culture since the Enlightenment. And that is, fundamentally God is unknowable. And that's, that's the thing we all need to understand. This idea, for example, one of the things that they talk about now is the historical Jesus, because there's a difference between the historical Jesus and the Jesus of the Gospels, who is more like a literary character. See, and The Gospels aren't real firsthand accounts. They were written by people who mythologized a person who may have not even existed. I mean, you see where this goes.
Have you ever heard Joe Rogan on this? It's even weirder.
I haven't, but I have no doubt that
Joe
Rogan
talks about some mushroom
things, so.
cult and how that led. It's really
weird. I mean, and
Have I heard that one?
So there, it's an attitude about religion that pervades most even Christian, people who would call themselves Christians or people who would even call themselves Catholics. And I speak from experience here because my father is a perfect example of this. He'll tell me something like, for example, we'll go to there's nothing in the Bible that says to do this. Okay. And I'll point to him in the Bible where it is to do that. And he'll
Hold
say,
on. Is your dad a sola scriptura Catholic?
Dad is somebody who says he converted to the Catholic Church, but never really converted to the Catholic religion.
Okay. Interesting.
So he believes like most baby boomers do, that you can pick out the pieces that you like. And, it's why they all get divorced. Basically, you carve relationships up and you keep the discrete parts that you like, and then you get rid of the rest of them. And who cares about how selfish and that is? And we don't care about any of that stuff. And that's just the way. I mean, that's why their divorce rate's like 50%.
Yeah,
it's just the way they think about everything. Like, keep the parts of life that I like, and I reject the other stuff. Okay. But once you tell him where something is in the Bible that he's just saying you shouldn't be doing that because it's not in the Bible, you point to where it is, and now all of a sudden, the Bible's not that reliable, and it's not an authoritative source.
Really?
It just happens that fast. It happens so quickly because
I haven't heard that one before.
You can always fall back on this American. People always ask me what is the church's beef with Freemasonry, and there are many, but the bottom line is it makes religion suck. It makes religion into something insipid. It turns Christianity into Lakewood Church. It even does this to the other religions too. It turns Buddhism into a yoga studio. It makes religion into this sort of commercialized experience that is largely there to make you feel good about something because, we don't really know anything.
But Freemasonry is at its core a religion, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I absolutely
want to make sure you knew that.
Of course. Yes. Of course it's a religion, but they've
got like a supreme deity.
But again, there are all these other religions out there. They don't bother. I mean, I stay away from them. They stay away from me, and it is what it is.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I don't see anything. I don't feel a threat from the Buddhists or what they're doing to American culture. I think their religion is wrong. They probably think the same about mine, although that's the cool thing about Buddhism is it's basically nihilism wrapped in a religion. So it doesn't really believe in those dichotomies of truth and untruth, and isn't that convenient, right? My issue with what the Freemasons do is it pervades the common culture about religion and turns it into meaninglessness, and then here we are 200 years after the founding of our country in a crisis of meaning because all of our institutions have failed because they don't mean anything anymore, and that's the dangerous thing about Freemasonry. And I mean, the most dangerous thing about it, in my opinion, is the influence that it spreads and the destructiveness that has on one of the most fundamental experiences of the human person, which is, your connection to God and your spirituality. And it just eviscerates that and turns the common experience of religion into a thread of nothing but nothingness. It's just nothingness without end. I don't know.
Have you guys read?
I'm drinking a beer. So
have you guys read Augustine? Confessions?
Yeah, long time ago, but yeah.
I was really shocked to see that back when he was talking about how the liturgy should be in the language of the people in which it's being served. I was like, really? They're saying that back in like the 400s? That was kind of surprising to me. That doesn't mean you should take away parts of the Latin Mass and turn them into whatever the Novus Ordo is these days. But I think taking away parts of the Mass to create the Novus Ordo was absolutely a mistake. But
yeah, well, I mean, the proof's in the pudding right there. But I mean,
what do you think of this comment right here, Chris? Darren says, I think people who go in on apparitions are somewhat Gnostic. I fell into that trap as a teenager. Blah, blah, blah. Fascinated me. I don't know how to say it.
I think
so-
there's an easy test. I think there's an easy test. Okay. Does your private revelation or whatever you're following bring you back to church in the fullness of it? Or does it take you further and further into this secret club that only they do what's right and everybody else is wrong? Like, which way is it taking you? Are you going back to public revelation and the liturgy and attending church and getting a fuller, deeper meaning out of it? Or is it pulling you away into almost like a Catholic cult or like the
Palmarian Catholic Church is the one true church. Everybody knows that. Okay.
yeah, something like that. Exactly. Or that did you guys ever see the Pope Michael documentary? It's
Of course, yes. Pope
amazing.
Michael. Shout out
Oh
to
my
Pope Mike.
gosh.
Shout out to Pope Mike.
He's dead.
He's dead.
Well, great. Now
Yeah.
don't I feel like a jerk.
It's Pope Michael II now, I think, right? The guy from the Philippines.
I don't know who his
Pretty
follow-up
sure.
was.
They I know that they got a new pope, whatever that church
They
is
got a
calling
new
itself
one.
these days. But
So, yeah, so that definitely makes sense.
no,
you
I'm
know?
I'm a sede vacantist in the Pope. I'm so radical. I'm actually a Pope Michael sede vacantist. That's how.
no.
That's
Set
how
of
trad I
probationist
am.
is the way to go, guys.
Yeah,
Just-
that's
You're
how
so
trad I am.
Mark, you're so trad that you're a pagan like your ancestors.
Yeah, I worship the pagan gods. That's how old. That's how far back I take it.
So I read Charismania by Kennedy Hall, which I thought was a relatively good book. But I will say this: his narrative voice does not work well for women, because the few women I know that tried to read it could not get into the book.
Of Kennedy's book.
Really?
Yeah, the
Why?
Charismania book.
Why do you think that is? I'm curious.
Because he comes across. I don't mind it because I know I've watched Kennedy's Hall stuff in the past, but other people who aren't really familiar with Kennedy's style might be. He's got a very strong, and podcasty style narrative, and if you're not into podcasts, or you're not into necessarily male narratives, it's going to be hard to get into that book.
I have not read it. All I know is
It was free on Kindle Unlimited, so if you got that, then you should definitely read it.
we have a Catholic Charismatic Center in Houston, and I'm sure their motu proprio is coming. Right? I'm sure it's on the way.
No,
All I know is I went there one time, very young, for a conference. I think we were hosting Scott Hahn. Scott Hahn was giving, and this is one of the only venues big enough to host something like that at the time. And boy, I just got, I'm one of these people that listens to their feelings, and I tell people, I'm not saying your feelings are in the driver's seat all the time and they're telling you what to do, but I think you should listen to your feelings. And if you're someplace and something feels wrong, listen to that. And it just felt super Jim Jonesy. It felt not like something I should be a part of. Now, does that mean I can put my finger on it and give you this really? I'm not Kennedy. I can't give you this really articulate. It just didn't feel right to me, so I never really had it.
Well, has Kennedy come on your podcast before?
Never.
Never.
Okay, all right.
No.
I mean, we've been.
not we're not opposed to it. The way I said
Yeah.
that sounds like never. No, that's not true. But
No,
I just meant I was just gonna say some of his experience in his book. I've had identical experiences, and it gave me the heebie-jeebies when it was happening, and I was like, ooh, okay. And I'm reading this book, and I'm like reliving all these experiences, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting some PTSD on here.
the crazy thing about the Catholic charismatic movement is you can literally trace it to Duquesne University at a Protestant revival or whatever type service is how it started. And now the crazy thing is from apostolic times till that, you didn't really, at least to my knowledge, you don't read about there being anybody in the Catholic Church that would have these gifts of unintelligible tongues, which unintelligible tongues is opposed to
That's in here.
is opposed to what tongues is even in the Bible. It wasn't, unintelligent. It was just obviously a language they didn't know, and so on and so forth. But my point is, but when I've talked to people that support the charismatic movement, they then try to take the mystics and stuff like that throughout history and say, well, this was a form of a charismatic type movement. And you're like, no, you're literally just taking that and forcing it into your to your viewpoint, because we can literally go back and pinpoint the day that the Catholic charismatic movement began. We can pinpoint it. It's not hard. And it wasn't over 100 years ago. It was in the 70s or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
So here's something that I forgot to mention earlier about Gnosticism. One of the things that they do in Gnosticism is they pretend like the Old Testament God is not the same God that created everything, or rather he did, or they say that he did, but he was a fallen God. So it's like they want to divorce the Old Testament from Jesus and then say Jesus also wasn't the supreme being. So like they basically can reject the whole Bible, but then employ whatever parts of it they want.
Yeah, no, I did know that, and I don't know if you've ever had the experience, but I've come across Protestants through my life who don't say the God of the Old Testament is different than the God of the New Testament, but they still make that same line of reasoning. They just more or less say God was like this in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament he's changed. Now he's a God of love. Where here, you know, in the Old Testament he was, and you're like, no, that is, to your point, you're basically taking that Gnostic viewpoint of being two different gods and trying to gel it into one so that you can say, I still believe it's the same God. I still believe in God, you know, and whatnot. He's just different now.
And then I call upon this guy to help me when I need it, you know?
Yeah, right on. Absolutely.
What was you made a comment earlier where you even mentioned, I don't know if you were talking about sports in general or the sports games involve Gnosticism.
That was mostly a joke, but it's kind of true.
I thought you were serious.
Have you? Yeah, and the Demiurge Yaldabaoth thing. That's actually in one of the games I was talking about earlier. Persona is filled with characters like Demiurge, who's like this all-controlling version of the Old Testament God. He wants full control, which is obviously not how the God of the Christian faith actually interacts with people. He, generally speaking, has the free will thing full on all the time. But that's neither here nor there. But I thought it was funny. Somebody actually knew what I was talking about. Yaldabaoth and Demiurge. And Sophia. Sophia is the one that I was talking about earlier. She's the one that allegedly creates the lakes, the rivers, and through a expulsion of hot liquid creates the hot water. Anyways, if you get what I was saying with that. Don't want to gross anybody out. That's why I was.
Oh,
yeah.
All right. Cthulhu. That is not in here. That is a separate cult.
See what's afraid to go there. That's right.
Sports. So sports creates teams, right? And sometimes these teams get pretty strange rituals before games. Sometimes they'll embrace things that are parallel to Gnosticism. Like, for example, you ever seen Friday Night Lights?
Sure.
The show?
Yeah. Not the show.
I don't know if I've seen the show, actually.
So in Friday Night Lights, towards the end of Friday Night Lights, they start doing a Samoan war chant to roll into their games in order to intimidate the opponent. And I'm just like, that seems a little culty to me. I mean, I get that it builds this camaraderie thing, but let's find things that build camaraderie that don't involve invoking like
the haka. We got to do the haka. Everybody's got to do the haka.
Is that the New Zealand thing?
That's the New Zealand thing.
That's
where she's like ripping them. It's like, whatever the heck that is.
Yeah, and they've been doing that haka dance for 20 years.
And everybody's got a haka. Everybody's got their own haka.
And to be honest, it's not really that impressive, but anyway.
Look, I'm part Native American. I'm not going back to invoking Native American spirits or anything, okay? But I've got more than that. What's that lady's name? Pocahontas, whatever her name is. You know what I'm talking about, right? Elizabeth Warren. I have a higher percentage than she does. I'm not about to go. I'm not about to go to college and say, give me free stuff here or anything. If you saw my grandmother, I know I don't look very much like it, but if you saw my grandmother, you would agree that there's definitely Native American in this family. All right. Let's see here. Going back to Mario, let's get to St. George.
I was gonna say, let's get
to that, because I don't know if you guys do clips, but this could be one. So there's a lot of parallels between Mario and St. George. Mario's obviously secular. There's no religious aspect. He's not Saint Mario. But what was the main, like, let's say you're looking for, what is a main job that you could do in the Roman Empire? Be some kind of a soldier. You move up the ranks, you fight in battles, and then St. George, he does all that. His family, I think his parents both die relatively young, and he ends up joining, because I've read the Taylor Marshall trilogy, so I mix up what's actually historical with what Taylor Marshall wrote in his books. But I know both of his parents die. He joins the Roman military, becomes a soldier, moves up the ranks. Eventually, he comes out to, I think Cyrene is the correct place, and fights a dragon to save a princess. What does Mario do? What is the main job in a place full of pipes? Plumber, right? Plumber. full of pipes. Everywhere you go in Mario, there's pipes. He's got the best job in the world in the Mario universe. Okay. So he's moving up the ranks as a plumber. He's fighting dragons and saving the various characters. And then he eventually saves the princess from the dragon. He is literally like the plumber version of St. George.
Okay.
And he's morally, he's a good person through and through. He doesn't speak much. He just does the right thing consistently.
That's true.
There's never a game where Mario goes into the gray morally. He's always doing the right thing, and at least in the beginning. I can't speak to like Mario Odyssey and all that other stuff. There's like a weird hat possession thing in Mario Odyssey, but the original Marios were just the morally correct character saving the princess from the dragon.
Tell me about the Gnosticism in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, because I played that game, and I'm going to tell you what, I'm not right ever since then.
I don't think that you can automatically say that there isn't some version of Gnosticism, because as long as there's like a cult leader you can follow with an ideology that you can subscribe to, you could find Gnosticism anywhere. And it's
Mike
just a progressively.
And Mike Tyson became a Muslim in prison, so
and so did was it Muhammad Ali?
Muhammad Ali. Well, I know Malcolm X did. I don't know if Muhammad Ali. Ali became one before he.
No, he became Muslim. I don't know
during his boxing career, because they tried to get him out of boxing at one point
because he was Cassius Clay, and then he changed his name to Muhammad Ali. Yeah,
the greatest fighter of all time.
You could probably make an argument that the Islam religion has pieces of Gnosticism in it.
100%. Listen, here's my thing about the resurrection narrative, okay? Because if there's a story in the Bible that's hard to believe, and I believe I even asked my dad this one time. I said, "Do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus?" "Well, of course. Of course I do." I said, "Because I got to tell you, Dad, if there's a story in the Bible that stretches the limits of credulity, it has to be that, right? And yet it's the most believable because of how attested to it is and how many eyewitnesses there were. It's a historical fact, and not even atheistic biblical scholars can deny that. So I could get rid of the resurrection narrative in my head if the resurrection narrative went like this. Peter comes back. "Hey guys, you're never going to believe this. Jesus is back, but he'll only appear to me in a cave and he'll only talk to me. So you guys just have to believe whatever I say." Okay. Then you could be like, okay, well, obviously that's didn't happen and that's nonsense. Right. Or if I can't, "Hey, I have found these golden plates in the woods. Only I can read them. You can't read them. They say I get to sleep with all your wives. You just got to trust me. You just got to trust me here."
No, listen. I got
obviously
one for
you can,
but it's the end of the world, but they keep moving the date. Which one's
the
that
end
one?
of the world? They keep moving the date. So when, when an Arabian shepherd or whatever he was comes back from a cave saying God spoke to him directly and only him, and you just got to, "I'm the prophet now."
Have you ever looked into how he died, and if he died a certain way per his own prophecy, all of his stuff was bunk?
I don't know how he died. I don't know anything.
He basically says, I think it's something along the lines of, "Should I be a heretic? Let God cut my left artery," or something like that. And when he dies, it literally in their scripture, he says something to the effect of, "Oh God, my left artery, it's been busted open," or something like that.
Yeah.
There's actually threads in like Islam discussions where they're like, how do we explain this away?
Yeah.
Because it's so improbable that he should say that when he dies that it's like, wait a second here, what's going on with this?
Yeah. My biggest issue, and I'm not picking a fight or anything here. It's just one of these things that I can't get over is I can go to, I can't do this legally or even really morally, quite frankly. I'm not allowed to disturb human remains, but it's a physical possibility. I could go to the city of Medina, break into his vault, and I could hold his bones in my hand. I could hold Muhammad's bones in my hand. Okay. His bones are there. Where are Jesus's bones? And supposedly he's a lesser prophet to Muhammad.
Here's a better question. Where's Mary's bones?
Where are Mary's bones? Where are the bones? And this is such a fundamental question, because as the Gnostics often do, they deny the physical resurrection. Okay. The resurrection is a simple question. If it didn't happen, there ought to be something here left over, just like the rest of us that don't rise from the dead. Jesus is a very famous person in his day. Now, the Gnostics might tell you he became famous 300 years later when they invented a mythos about him, but there's too much first century evidence for that to be true. So we know that he was famous in his day. There's a lot of people writing about this person at a time in which people really didn't write biographies about people. It just wasn't a thing you did. You didn't even write biographies about the Caesars. But there's a lot of people writing biographies of this first century Galilean carpenter turned mendicant preacher who supposedly performed miracles. There should be an accounting for the body. In fact, if you're a first century Sadducean temple authority and you want to put an end to this Jesus movement once and for all,
you display them right there in front of
go
everybody.
Get the body. Like, go get the body. They didn't do that. That to me is proof that whatever you believe about the resurrection of Jesus, it's a historical fact that tomb was found empty.
The Sadducees
never
actually
been an accounting.
Pretty much
body.
Rejected resurrection outright. Like
yeah, they rejected it outright.
They rejected most of the prophecies of the Bible, the Old Testament, or the Torah, the Talmud, all that stuff.
Yeah, they were mainly on the Pentateuch. Is that what that was called? The first 5 books of Moses.
They only believed in the written law. They didn't believe in the oral law.
And by the time Jesus was around, they didn't even really believe in that. The only thing they
didn't believe
in was compromising with worldly and secular authorities.
Yeah,
which is why when we get accused of being the Pharisees, because you tradies, you're the Pharisees, you're the new modern Pharisees. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is some truth to that. But if we're the Pharisees, you guys are the chief priests, and I don't know how to tell you, but they weren't exactly the heroes of that story either. So
one of the best things you could be would be a mirror of like the Essenes. That'd be like a monk, a modern day monk. They basically framed the entire like idea of a monk after like how the Essenes ran things. They were quiet, prayerful, away from the world type of Jews.
Also somewhat agnostic though, right? Essenes,
no.
Didn't they have a secret knowledge thing going on or no?
Not really. No, they fully embraced the Danielic prophecies and all that. They'd be more likely to become Christians than like the Pharisees or the Sadducees. There's actually a thread that there's some people that believe the Essenes were converted by John the Baptist.
I've even heard
may have been taught by some of them. Who knows?
I was going to say I've even heard the argument. People say that John the Baptist may have been an Essene himself.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, his parents were really old when he was born, so like, what happens when they die and he's young still? He might have went and joined the Essenes. Who knows? I don't know when they actually died. I don't know if that's
you know what I love the Essenes for more than anything.
What's that?
Is the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh no.
Dead Sea Scrolls came along
and ruined the Bible.
No, they actually proved the Catholic position on works, because you hear works of the law.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The only time you hear about works of the law in ancient literature, you hear it nowhere except in St. Paul's writings.
Yeah.
Then we discover the Dead Sea Scrolls, and all of a sudden you start seeing works of the law again, and they actually show us what the works of the law, what they meant by that phrase, and it proved the Catholic position.
I'm going to say something somewhat controversial here.
Okay.
Oh, I agree. Where are Joseph's?
I have an answer to this. Joseph was not a very famous person in his day. It would have been, it is not a mystery that Joseph's bones are not accounted for. But Jesus is a very different story altogether, because Jesus's death is the most famous execution that's ever happened in the history of the entire world. You would be very hard pressed to find anybody on earth that is simple. They might find people who love Jesus of Nazareth. You might find people who hate Jesus of Nazareth, but you'd be very hard pressed to find somebody that's simply never heard of Jesus of Nazareth. That's fascinating for a first century Galilean carpenter. That is amazing. If the resurrection is not true, the bottom line is there simply is no reason why Jesus should be a famous person. I mean, that is the truth. There's no reason why anyone should know his name, but for the fact that is a historical fact.
Do you know how many Danielic cults existed, like Daniel prophecy cults existed at the time of Jesus?
No.
A lot. There's even some theories on Barabbas, which if you translate from Aramaic, that literally means son of man or son of the father. I mean, Barabbas means son of the father. There are even some
Badarabah. Yeah, that's what it would mean. Badarabah.
There are even some like Protestant, I'll call them cults, that believe Barabbas was just another name for Jesus, and that they like there's some really weird.
Well, wasn't his name Jesus Barabbas? Like, didn't he have the
It
Yeshua
may
name
have
also?
been something like that, or Joshua or Yeshua, whatever. He probably just gave himself that name. Let's be honest. You're trying to be a cult leader. So there's a lot of theories that maybe he was involved in the Zealot uprising when the temple falls. And so like his whole name is almost a prophecy in itself with that. Yeah. It's a very interesting, like when you start reading Josephus, have you ever read Josephus?
Yeah.
You have which
I mean, not the entire, I've read the passages that where he talks about Jesus. That to tell you that I've read Antiquities of the Jews, I'm not even going to pretend that, but yeah.
I'm about halfway through the Antiquities of the Jews, and it's funny because it matches up with everything the Catholics believe. And he was a first century Pharisee. Anyways, no, the best part is in the War of the Jews when he's talking about watching his temple burn down, and he said, "This has to be some prophecy from God." And I'm like, yes, Jesus said this is going to happen. Obviously, it is from God, but whatever it is, it's just funny because he accepts the fact that this is a judgment of God, but does not accept Jesus as God.
I think, yeah, it's clear to me from the gospel accounts and from other first century Jewish sources that had you been alive in the first half of the first century, there was an understanding that the time of Messiah has come. It's
the 70.
History is pregnant with this moment. Okay. And I think the gospel, the fullness of time is what the martyrology refers to it as, the fullness of time. So there's a reason why all these Pharisees are walking around asking Jesus who he is, or asking John the Baptist who he is. There's a reason why they're doing that, because they know the prophecy. They know that the prophets and the law and the prophecy about Messiah, and they could tell that the time has come. And so the idea that, well, Jesus was he couldn't be the Messiah because it wasn't the time of Messiah. It is simply not in accordance with what most Jewish scholars in Second Temple Judaism understood that time period to be. I mean, it's clear from the gospel accounts that they were looking for the Messiah.
Do you know what happens when King Herod dies in history? So when King Herod dies, because the Jews believe their Messiah has shown up, they were associating King Herod's death with the rise of the Messiah. They were associating those two events together. There's an uprising that happens. The Romans have to come in and quell the uprising, and they end up crucifying 2,000 Jewish people, literally. Just across the board, involved or not in this uprising, they just crucified 2,000 people. You can find the information. I think it's even on Wikipedia, so that's how you know it's true. But
and they've heard it on Texcathedra now, which basically means it's De Fide.
So after that, though, the Sadducees and the Pharisees are holding on to just a crumb of trust from the Roman Empire, and they are trying to hold on to that crumb with every bit of their being without losing their temple and their city. So they basically accept that the Romans are sending in a legate or a consul or whatever the heck they're called at the time. They accept the fact that they can maintain their people in this little jurisdiction of Jerusalem and the various outlying areas, and know that they have to accept a lot of things the Roman Empire is going to do that they don't like. And having these Messiah cults rise up, they have to shut every last one down, or they will lose that little bit of crumb they have left in their leadership. So it wouldn't have mattered if Jesus had said outright, "I am the Messiah," done crazy stuff. They wanted to keep that crumb, and they would have shut it down no matter what.
Oh yeah, I'm sure
it was going to they were going to shut it down. It didn't matter.
Yeah, no faith. No faith
So-
in God.
I was just gonna say real quick, I do have to go pick up my daughter.
Oh yeah, we're gonna wrap.
But-
It's already
but I
we're
was
at an hour. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all
But
right.
don't let me stop you if y'all want to continue on. 'Cause
No, I've got to
Chris,
wrap it up too. I got
I was
trial
gonna
in the
say I
morning,
gotta
so.
go. My wife is just texting me if am
Okay.
I gonna go pick her up. But
Christopher, to be
Um,
continued, because we're going to continue our conversation on. We're gonna
Yeah,
have
you
back on the
were-
show.
yeah, I was gonna say I really enjoyed you being on here, man. You're a fantastic guest, and man, I feel like we could talk about a lot of different things with you.
Yeah,
We should
we're gonna
talk
do this when we get some
Halo
more
and
time.
Christianity next time.
Okay, let's do
Oh,
it.
that was the one I was forgetting. I knew there was a game I was forgetting.
We'll
We'll
keep
save
it-
that for next.
We'll put a pin in that one, and we'll get it next time, guys. Go check out the Chrillcast. See, I can remember things.
I'll put the new channel I'm launching here soon. I'm launching a channel called Crash Catholic. It'll be
Crash
my
Catholic.
own, my
All
own
right.
podcast.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing a solo venture too. I'm just kidding, Jason.
Much as I do this anymore, it pretty much is.
Okay, we're gonna come back next week. We're gonna do a show. I'm gonna have I'm gonna talk about confession with now I can't remember his name. This is gonna drive me nuts, guys. It's so late in the day, and now I have to look this up. Jordan Burke. Jordan Burke's going to come on the show. He's going to talk about confession with us. I was going to have him on tonight, but I wanted to do this one because I don't know when I'm going to get to see Jason again. But check it out next week. We're going to come back. We're going to do more content in 2025. We're going to have Christopher back on. Jason, parting thoughts?
No, nothing to add. I just appreciate Chris coming on. It was
I do too. This
very
was a lot
interesting episode.
very, very interesting indeed. Guys,
Glad you
take
guys
care.
could have me on. I appreciate it.
Take care of
Did-
yourselves.
did
Take
he
care
have
of each
any-
other.
I was gonna say, did he have anything else he wanted to plug, or did you already plug all your stuff?
If you guys are watching this on my channel, go follow these guys.
Oh,
If you
thanks,
wanna-
man.
If you want to go find some text cathedra and not get text communicated.
That's right. We
Yeah.
don't want to have text communicate people, and our
We
text
throw that around
communications,
easy too.
They're binding. They're binding. Okay?
You'll never be able to go to Texas.
That's right. We will cast you into the outer darkness of Oklahoma, where there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, and remember, life is hard, but it's harder when you don't pray the rosary. God bless everybody.
God bless.